All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Worldhoppers. It's a collaborative channel where we have all of the AdSense revenue and merch sales go to charity. And today we're going to be talking about DNFing books, or books that we did not finish or do not finish, and just kind of our own personal idea of like when we are going to DNF, what makes a DNF, do we even DNF, those sorts of things. So the first question is, do you DNF more or less because of Booktube? So I'll let Jess go first. We'll kind of go in order. I'll go Jess, Leanna, Deshauna, TG, and then Q. And then if I haven't interrupted everybody enough times, then maybe I'll go. So.
Mine's pretty, I would say pretty similar before Booktube, but certain books, maybe if it was, I've mentioned it and people have mentioned wanting to hear my opinion, I will try for the sake of that to push through. But more often than not, it's been the same. Like, sometimes I'll push through. Sometimes I can DNF a book in 5% in, or yeah, it hasn't really changed because of Booktube. Because I'm like, well, I have other things to read, so moving on.
If only I was like that. What about you, Leanna?
I definitely, I barely ever DNF because of Booktube, because I feel like I can't review something properly if I haven't finished it, because then every single thing I say about it in a review, I have to qualify and put an asterisk and be like, maybe by the end this gets fixed. Maybe by the end he did it better. Maybe by the end she fixed this. But I don't want to have to say that. I want to be able to say, I've read this whole thing and I can tell you for a fact that these problems that I have are problems to the very last page. And I don't feel like it. And usually by the time I'm thinking about DNFing, or when I would think of DNFing something, I'm probably halfway through. At that point, I'm I've put enough time into this. I don't want to not be able to claim this as read on Goodreads and be able to review it. This has been more of a waste of my time if I don't finish it and don't get anything out of it. But if I didn't have a Booktube channel and I wasn't doing anything, I'd be like, well, whatever, I'm done with that. So Booktube definitely makes me read bad books all the way through.
I would say, I don't know. I've always been fine with DNFing, but I would say yes, I do DNF more now, because I am there's too many books I want to read, and because of Booktube, I know of so many more books. My endless TBR is so much longer. I own more books that I need to freaking read. So if I'm not having a good time, I'm just I'm out. And when I talk about them, obviously I don't do individual reviews of books I DNF'd, because I'd be I don't know, I didn't really read it, but these are the things that it's
So when I see on Goodreads when people do a review and they're I only read 20 pages of this, but here's my review of this book, and I'm I don't think you're allowed.
Yeah, but I talk about them in wrap-ups, recent wrap-ups, and just say why I DNF'd it. You know what I mean? What about it was bugging me, but I do not push through. I've DNF'd at 70%. I've DNF'd well over 50% many times, where I'm just I'm done. I don't care. I tried. I'm over it. And in my head, sometimes I'll be I don't have that much longer, I read 450 pages and there's only 100 pages left. But if I don't care, I just don't care. And I just don't want to waste my time. So, but yeah, I think more so because of Booktube.
I already don't DNF that much. It pains my soul to DNF. It hurts. I know. It hurts. And so I'd probably say less, because if someone has a hot take, oh, this book is this is the book you got to read, and I'm all right, I got to read it. And even if I'm not feeling it, I'm well, maybe there's something at the end that makes it it flips. So I got to read it. And then if they're oh, this book is trash, don't ever touch it, I'm well, why is it trash? I got to know, and I got to read it, and I got to figure out what's to the end and why it's trash. I'm oh yeah, I agree, it's trash. So it's it's both. Both sides make me DNF even less, because I have to validate why it's trash, or I have to also, sing to the choir of why it's pretty awesome. So probably less.
I have to interject real quick, because the one time I pushed through because of the hype of how this ends. Oh my God, the ending. And I was having a miserable time reading the book.
Oh no.
He says the ending was freaking Rage and Dragon. And like, lesson learned, I should have DNF'd it because we got
Alex were here. Alex would be
haunt
like,
me.
we're 5 minutes in, and Shoshana had to
I know.
But like, it was just a prime example. Like throughout it, I kept being like, I want to DNF this, but like everybody says the ending makes it so great. And then I got to the ending, and I was like, no, that was not worth my time for me.
I respect that. I'll respect that. So.
I get that feeling though.
What you found at the end was just Rage of Shoshana.
Yeah. That's the title of the video where
I'm a fan, Shoshana. I know the titles of your videos.
oh, thanks.
So I DNF if it wasn't for TG. Like I would DNF any and everything. Like I don't care. Like I'm not wasting my time. But because of Booktube and because of TG, I DNF less because of that combination.
Makes you push through.
Yeah, he makes me push through, but like reading
Makes you
like
suffer.
reading a book with him that he is so obvious, like just DNF it. But he complains about it. He's mad about it. He's just like, I can't read this because, and I'm like, bro, just stop. Like, you don't have to keep doing this. Like, just stop it. Do not read. Do not pass go. Stop. And he's just like, nah, I gotta see how it ends, and we know the ending's gonna be terrible, but you're still gonna do it. I don't get it. And I'm just talking junk about him. But I would say this to say that I would DNF a whole lot more if it wasn't for TG to push me through and say, let's finish this book and let's keep going. But yeah, I think I answered the question. Maybe.
I don't know if that's the truth for you, TG, but like when I am like hating something, that is what kind of keeps me going. It almost makes it fun then if I have somebody to be like, oh, and then this thing happened, and can you believe like this author put this in here now? And then I'm just like, now I'm excited to like find the next ridiculous thing.
And as much as Q is right about my complaining, he also enjoys my complaining. Like he
it's funny.
To hear me rant.
It's hilarious.
So because he's in the back just laughing and giggling, like you should stop.
Like,
okay, what do you think about the next chapter? So he kind of like pokes me to keep reading.
It is entertainment. It is entertainment, but I mean, I will try to look at it from you and Leanne's point of view and like try to like rip a book apart just because I'm like, all right, yeah. But to me, it's just like if I don't enjoy it, I'm just like, move on. Like I got it. What's next? What's good? You know, what can I enjoy? So, no, I feel y'all though.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a mindset thing. I definitely DNF less because of Booktube for a lot of the reasons that have already been discussed. And I'm just always like, sorry, I think my husband was moving around or something in the other room. But I feel like, for example, just the other day, Leanna, there's a book that she loves, and Shoshana didn't like it, and I was reading it, and I was like, okay, well, one of my friends loves this. And
what book are you talking about?
I know, The Wolf, which is one of her favorites. She's read it 5 times now, and I'm sitting there, and like I'm messaging Shoshana, and I'm like, just everybody is the best warrior. That's everybody is, and I'm just going off about the book for silly reasons, but I think if I don't have another person to talk to and I'm frustrated with a book, then I'm just frustrated because I'm like, nobody can even feel my pain.
And that's when you film a rant review, and planning for that rant review is the friend you're messaging.
But I feel like I don't know. I always feel bad ranting about books publicly. I don't feel bad ranting about them to my friends. I know Jess is always like, you're too nice.
That's why I finished The Court of Silver Flames. I was like, oh no, I'm making a video about this book.
Well, and I also have this stupid fear because I don't know how many of you have experienced this before, but there will be books sometimes that I'm like, man, if it doesn't get better, I'm DNFing. And then it will turn around. You're like, oh, I'm so glad I didn't DNF it because it got so good. And then I'm always scared that some books that I'm reading, it's going to be like that, where I don't like it at first and then it turns around. And then I'm like, but what if this is one of those books? And then I don't know. But I'm so with you. If I'm not enjoying something, I don't want to be engaged with it anymore.
Yeah.
Even if I remember a while ago, and this makes me sound like such a brat, but for Christmas, My in-laws, they all wanted to go see a movie together, and it was a movie I absolutely didn't want to go see. And I was like, just let me sit at the food court at the mall and I'll read a book. And like, really, I don't mind. They're like, you have to come with us. And I'm like, I really don't want to go. And then they're like, no, it'll be fun. You'll like it. I'm like, I know I will not like this movie. And then I just sat the whole movie like, and then afterwards, like, what'd you think of the movie? I was like, I thought it sucked. Just like
That's when you need headphones and an audiobook, and then you can sit there and be like, I'm still reading a book.
I'm here.
I mean, I will say, I don't think I was being as bratty as I'm making myself out to be. Maybe I don't know. But like, I hate wasting money and wasting time. And so if I'm engaging with something that is essentially wasting my time because I'm not enjoying it to some degree or I'm not getting something out of it, then I'm like, there's so many other things I could be doing right now or other books I could be reading. But then I think of Booktube and I'm like, but I told people I was going to read it. And then I feel bad.
I don't give a crap. Sorry about it. I didn't read it.
So I have two questions that are very, very similar, which we kind of touched on. Leanna touched on it a little bit, but do you think it's fair to review or rate books you've DNF'd? And then do you think it's fair to review, rate series you've DNF'd? So the second one is different because, as an example, I've only read the first 4 of 14/15 Wheel of Time books. And I'm comfortable being like, here's why I didn't like this series. And other people think that that's not okay, that you have to read the whole series or you don't know what you're talking about and those sorts of things. So I'm curious your thoughts. We'll start with just books, though, because I feel like that's a less well, maybe it's more complicated to talk about that one. But do you think it's fair to rate, review books you've DNF'd?
I personally don't rate books I've DNF'd. And I really don't review. Sometimes if there was something like I get hit, because sometimes I DNF a book and I just can't tell you why. I'm like, I just don't care or I just don't like it. But sometimes I'm like, there's a specific thing. So I might write a small paragraph on Goodreads, like DNF'd it 30%, wasn't feeling blah, blah, blah. But like I couldn't, and I don't really talk about DNFs in my wrap-ups because I don't consider them like I read the book. But I did like a DNF video talking about all the books I've DNF'd, but like I don't consider that a review or rating. And I know some people do. And I don't think it's fair, but you know, you do what you want to do because you haven't finished the book. It'd be different if I read like 80% and then I kind of skim read to the end maybe, but I would say I skim read to the end because I have no shame in that. But yeah, I don't, just a few sentences. I'm like, wasn't feeling this or wasn't vibing with the character or too slow, and put it on my little DNF because nobody got time list on Goodreads, and then I keep pushing.
I mean, I'm too lazy to write reviews most of the time anyway, so I don't write a review for a DNF either. But I think it would be fair. Like, I have my Goodreads set up to where if I DNF something, it takes it off all my other shelves and it's not rated and it doesn't count towards my read books. But it's still like it's on that shelf, so you can see that, okay, I did pick this up and then I chose to DNF it. So like, It's not something that's still to be read. Like, I have assessed the situation and I found it wanting. So and like, again, like I'll mention it, like you said, like if I tend to try to read the books that I put on my TBR, and then like in a wrap up I'll always say like, this wasn't on my TBR but I read it anyway, etc. So at that time is when I would also, like, if I did pick up one of the books on my TBR and it's not something that, I didn't get around to finishing it, like I am choosing not to finish it, so I feel like it's relevant to say, okay, so like I also did pick this one up and I will not be finishing it, but I'm not gonna like post a review for it or count it towards my Goodreads goal. And I think, again, on Goodreads it'd be fair to like put a non-rating, like you don't count it towards having read it, but like to put like text saying why you DNF'd it, because that's a review that is helpful to say like, look, I can't review the book, but I can tell you that I didn't feel like I could go on with this because of these reasons. Like, that's important for people to know as well. So like, that's totally fair.
Yeah, I don't typically give a rating for books that I've DNF'd because, excuse me, because I would have to give that caveat of like, this is the rating for the 20% of the book I read, and like, well, okay, like it's not the whole book. Like, when you're rating on Goodreads or Amazon or whatever, like you are rating the book.
You would think.
For me, logically, it's not even that I think it's like morally wrong or anything. It just like logically doesn't make sense to me. Like, I didn't read the whole book, but the only book I've ever DNF'd that I did rate was recently, actually, and it was one where it was like a 600-page book, and I read 450 pages of it, and it was the third book in a series, and I was just like, no, absolutely not. Like, and I felt like that was enough of it. It was like 80% or so of the book. I still gave a caveat of like, I did DNF this at like however much percent, but like, oh my God, 1 star.
What book was this?
It was friggin' Crown of Gilded Bones. The Jennifer L. Armentrout, the third one, that Blood and Ash series.
Yes.
Maybe I should read it. I'm just kidding. Yeah, I typically don't, but I use Storygraph, which I love. And one reason I love is because they have an automatic built-in like status for a book. You can do like currently reading, want to read, whatever, and then did not finish. And when you set the status as did not finish, it just asks you to add explanation if you want. But like it automatically goes to like your did not finish like section. So I like that because I don't consider that like, and like I said, when I talk about the books I DNF in my wrap ups, like I don't know, to me that's not like a review. That's just me saying why I DNF'd this book. So yeah, but yeah, I would say I don't necessarily, again, not even that I think it's fair or not. I just logically it doesn't make sense to me.
No, I agree with everything y'all are saying. Like, I think it's fair to review and talk about what you've read and like why you felt like what you read, made you feel like you didn't want to continue. I mean, because you did read that, you took that part in, and everyone has their own perspectives of how that affected them. And so to say like I read, up to 25%, page 200. I had to stop because of these triggers, these characters who were not interested in me, and I didn't read anymore, bam, put that out there. I think that's fair. You gave people your whole 360 of where you're coming from with the book. You didn't say, hey, I wouldn't read this book, because of this, because you didn't read the book. You just gave them your opinion on what you read, and I think that's fair.
I think it's similar to what TG said. I think it's fair that you can give your opinion on a book based off of what you've read. I think that's fair. I personally have not rated a book that I've DNF'd, just because, maybe it does turn around at the end. I just don't have the tolerance to make it there. Just ain't me. But I have rated one book that I DNF'd, and that was It by Stephen King. I couldn't get past the one part. It was like, what was it, 98% into the book, and
you only had like 50 pages left.
It was terrible. Y'all, we made a video about it. Like, it's just, we can't. I couldn't. It's just, but I knew the book was good, and I knew it was going to end well because I seen the movie, and I was like, all right, whatever. I kind of know what's going to happen. So yeah, no, I let it go. But that was the only.
I'm just sorry. As a reader, you just said, I don't need to finish this book because I've seen the movie.
I know what you. I know. But have you read it? Okay.
But I know what I know.
That statement.
I know
that statement is suffice for that one book. Any other book, I feel you, but that one, it was like, no.
I, a long time ago, was starting to read it, and then someone told us about that scene, and I was like, what? And I looked into it, and then I found the scene online, right? And I was reading through, and I was like, yeah, I'm not gonna read all this just to get to this part. No thanks. And then I stopped. So I don't blame you because I would have been really upset. As far as if I think it's fair or not, I don't really use Goodreads, and then on my channel, I wouldn't do probably a full review if I DNF'd it, because then you haven't read the whole book. I will talk about it in a wrap up. I'll say, okay, I'll start with my DNFs. Here's the ones I DNF'd. Here's why, because I still think, like Leanna pointed out, and like a lot of you are saying, it's completely fair to voice why you stop reading it. But I also can understand, because she's not in the video, so I don't mean to speak for her, but having talked to Jade, she basically rates everything, and she uses Goodreads as like a personal, almost like book. Her channel is kind of like a book diary, and Goodreads goes along with that. And so I know that she will rate things even if she DNF'd it. And I think it's because she not saying like the way you DNF, Jess, is somehow like wrong or something, but when she DNFs, it usually is because like I didn't like this, I don't like this book, as opposed to like I'll move on. Like if she's just like, oh, I'm gonna put it down, maybe come back to it later, I don't think she would rate it. But when it comes to something that she truly didn't like, for her it's like, well, it's the book's fault. I don't want to go on because of the quality or because of some stupid thing that came up. Again, I don't mean to speak for Jade, so, you know, like, take this with a grain of salt. But she's expressed something to that extent, and I think that that makes complete sense, even if it's not something I would...
Well, I'm assuming from that any DNF she rates as a 1-star.
I think
so.
But like I've seen like ratings or in Goodreads that are like, it says in the text, you know, that they DNF'd it, but they gave it 3 stars, and I'm like...
They could tell that the book is like, they thought it was a good book, but for them, you know, like I can see maybe why some people... My favorite though, and I've mentioned this before, but my absolute favorite 1 star after a DNF review was for Mistborn, when they're like, I read 3 pages or something like that. I was like, 3 pages? Were they like the author's notes? I don't understand.
You don't like the sound of this guy.
But at the same time, I don't know. I'm curious if you've ever experienced this, where you start a book and immediately you're like, oh, no. This is not the book I'm going to like.
Sometimes you can tell the first chapter.
Yeah.
And you're like, just, I think that happened for me with the flat share, I think. I feel like it was the flat share. It was some book. It was literally the writing style, because it was either that one or Normal People by Sally Rooney. It was, she didn't use like quotations or like punctuation for people when they were talking.
That bothered me about Normal People. That's why I did it on audio, because you can't see quotation marks.
I was like, no. And so I made it like one chapter and was like, no, thank you.
It's like Cormac McCarthy, who's he wrote the book The Road. I think that's the most popular one on Booktube anyway. But he does that. He doesn't have quotations and commas. He basically doesn't believe in commas. So he'll just use and over and over and over again in a sentence instead of having a comma. And it's like, why? And typically what's so funny and why I think, you know, books are subjective is because so many people have him as a great writer, and I think he's an award-winning writer and they think it's fantastic. And I'm like, if I submitted, I get that it's not just that, and I get that it's intentional, but if I submitted a manuscript to an agent with no punctuation like that, they're going to be like, this is bad. So anyway, I know that there's more to the book than that, but I think that I can see why other people do it. But I think that what would be unfair is if you're like, oh, I'm just so busy right now, I don't have the time, or this isn't holding my interest because I have so much going on, so 1 star. I think that would be pretty unfair, because that's just like, oh, your life got busy. That's not the book's fault. But I do want to add, Shoshana, when you were like saying, oh, well, you know, a review or rating is supposed to be for the whole book, just mentioning, this is a little off topic, but one of my favorite things on Amazon is to find people that are like, the book was damaged. And it's like, this worked so hard. An author works so hard, and there's one little damage. Or like sometimes Amazon will have the pages are out of order. Yeah. And then they're like, 1 star.
That's why I feel like rating, I mean, because like it is real. I mean, like a lot of reviews on Amazon most of the time is like this like if you bought a chair and you're like, don't order this chair, it arrives horribly packaged and it will be like broken, then like that's relevant to know. And like, because Amazon is for purchasing things, not just for like the quality of the story, like you are also like, because like I was looking at reviews for the illustrated edition for Clash of Kings, because I have the illustrated edition of Game of Thrones, and all the reviews were saying the quality, like the paper and the binding is not as good quality as like Game of Thrones illustrated edition. And I was like, I want to know that, because like I'm expecting to pay the same amount to get the same kind of quality as the first one. And I was just like, oh, thank you for letting me know that.
That's a good point. It is funny because didn't Amazon start as an online book retailer?
Yeah, they only sold books at first.
Yeah, so it is kind of funny that now it's expected that the product condition is kind of tied in. But yeah, that's a good point. Does anybody else have anything to add to that before we go to the one about series?
I was going to say, just for me personally, I'm similar with Jess, where I think that's a big reason I don't think it's fair for me specific because I DNF so freely and just for like I just wasn't feeling it. Like whenever I do a books I DNF'd for the year video, literally the whole thing is just me being like, I don't know, I didn't care. Like literally I should title those videos books I just didn't give a crap about, because that's what I just keep saying. I don't know, I just didn't give a crap anymore. Like, so for me it's like, yeah, it wouldn't really be fair for me, I think, to review that when it's just like the vibes were off. Like, so I just don't.
Yes.
Yeah. So the series one, like I said, I don't know if this is a more complicated answer for anybody. I think all day long you can say whatever you have to say about the amount of books that you've read within a series, and there are certain things that while they might change later in the series, I still think that the books, they don't have to stand on their own necessarily, as in every book in the series needs to have a very conclusive, concrete, this is the end, because obviously the series is going to continue. But there are certain things, like to use Wheel of Time as an example again, the writing style and the abundance of descriptions about little things I don't care about, that's not like, oh, well, like in book 5 that goes away and then it's not there the rest of the series. It's like, no, that's always going to be there. So these are things about Wheel of Time that aren't my favorite, and that's why I'm not continuing on. I don't think that that's a bold statement. Sorry, I went first and it's supposed to be Jess. But I remember my husband, who has read the entire Wheel of Time series, he grew up reading it. We did a video where we were reacting to people's unpopular opinions about Wheel of Time, and I was kind of the person who's only read part of the series, but I know what happens, and he's the person that's read the whole thing, so we were giving both of our views. And one person was like, your husband hasn't read it recently enough, and then you didn't finish it, so neither of you can talk. And I'm like, I mean, we feel that way, fine, but I feel like we can't talk.
Those are the rules, Ellen. You broke them.
I know I did. I should take the video down.
How dare you? I don't like, I feel like what you said, what they need to stand on their own, especially in a super long series. It should not be, well, wait till you get to book 8. No, that is ridiculous. It should, if you, even in a trilogy, if you're not feeling it, and I don't, you know, obviously on Goodreads or whatever rating site is rare that the books are like grouped together so you can rate the whole thing. But if you're doing like a video or something, I think it's fair to give, like, I started this series, it has 2 books, or it has 4 books, I've read 2, and like I don't feel like I'm gonna enjoy it for this reason. I think that's more fair because you've like read at least an entire book and you get a good example of the author's writing and like pacing and things. And of course that could change, and maybe you're just not interested. Like for me personally, I read A Darker Shade of Magic and I was like, oh, okay. Like I just felt like whatever. And I tried to read the second one, and because at the end of the first one, I felt like it could have been a standalone. Tried to read the second one, and I was like, oh. And to me, it was just like that, you know, like it's not always like certain things. I think you can just tell from reading. You don't have to read a whole series to know if it's going to be for you or not. And yeah, just to repeat that, I hate when people are like, no, wait till you get to book 4 or 5. Or with Wheel of Time, when they're like, yeah, the first 4, but then maybe book 8 through 12 are going to be real slow, but then it's going to wrap up real nice. Like, are you kidding me? I'm not spending all that time reading all that mess. So, I mean, I have the first 2. I haven't read them, though.
I can't wait for you to read them. I'm so excited.
I want to like it, obviously, so I could be with the fan people, but then I also don't want to like it. So I could be like, y'all have been lying to me all these years, and I could just yell about it on the internet. But I don't know.
I know someone that was like, I kind of wish that individuals like you had said more of what you didn't like about the series more often, because now I'm, 9 books in, or 10 books, 12, whatever. I'm this far in, and I'm like, well, I have to finish now. I only have a couple left. They're like, but I wish I'd ended sooner. So I feel, I hope you like them, Jess.
I mean, I feel about series the same way I do about DNFing a book, in the sense that, like, it is absolutely fair to explain why you're choosing not to go on with something. And so, like, you're not wrong. It's just like, you have reasons that you don't think that spending any more time with this book or any more time with this series is worth it to you. And no, I don't think you can say, if you haven't finished the series, that you know for a fact this series is terrible, but you can say, I have no interest in this series. I have read the first book, or I have read the first 2 books, and they did not appeal to me. And everything that I've seen and heard is that the series, like, it's not wildly different than the first 2 books, so I have no interest in going on. And I think that's totally fair. I do like to know, like, I like when people who have read series, and that's why I do this as well. Like, I don't think like books in a series do stand on their own to some degree. Like, they are components of a whole, but you also like they're individual books themselves, and you rate them not necessarily the same. So like, it is important to know, like, if there's a weak one in the series, or like if the series does take a dive and then, you know, saves itself. So like that, I'll want to know that. Like, I'll be like, if I see like negative ratings for the next book in the series, then I'm like, oh, does it keep getting bad? And then I'm like, oh, okay, no, but it seems like people think that the third book, like it recovered itself, or like, I'll want to know. I'm like, oh, maybe it's worth my time to like I want to know. And so then I'll also like always tell people like, oh, I didn't really like the first book in the series, and like, I'm glad someone pushed me to read the second one, because I did like that a lot better. But also, if you don't want to read the second book, like, you're not allowed to like, well, you can't say the first one is bad because you didn't read the second one, because I agree, the first one is bad. So yeah, people just need to let you not read things and say why.
Do you DNF series, like, or do you?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. It's like you suffer enough.
I feel bad for series completionists. I think it's one thing to be a completionist with a book. Like, you know, TG, you were saying it's really hard for you to DNF because even if it's bad, there's still momentum. But series completionists, I'm like, oh my gosh. First off, I would be so nervous to pick up any series. I'd always be like, but if I don't like this one, I have to really make sure I would overthink everything. And then I feel like I would just reread the series I already like. But talk about pushing yourself through something you don't like, that would be terrible. I do want to add, sorry, John, before you answer, that as far as people getting upset about DNFing series, let's be honest, I feel like people are only upset if you DNF a popular series. Because if it's a book that most people haven't heard of, nobody cares, which is funny to me, because I'm like, you realize that if I DNF this popular series, there's a chance everybody's already talking about A Song of Ice and Fire and Wheel of Time and Malazan and like all those things. But a bunch, you can find hundreds of thousands of videos about these series. You realize that if I now talk about this other thing over here because I have the time.
So you're not qualified to have opinions on fantasy at all if you haven't read all of the Wheel of Time and all of A Song of Ice and Fire.
Yeah. Let me be quiet. I've only read The Fellowship of the Ring, so I really can't talk about anything.
I've never read any of those. Yeah, I mean, it's like, they only care if it's a series they like.
Yeah.
Not even something popular, something they like. Because, like, something that's popular is currently anyways, in certain realms of Booktube, is the From Blood and Ash series by Jennifer L. Armentrout. Lots of people are liking that. Guarantee the dudes who yell at me about whatever adult fantasy, you know, Rage of Dragons, where's Alex, so he can be annoyed that I brought it up again. But, like, I have people being like, you can't, you have to read the second one, blah. I'm like, no, I don't wanna. Leave me alone. Guarantee they will not care. And they'll probably be like, yeah, exactly. It sucks when I say that I DNF that other series. You know what I mean? Like, because they think that's trash and doesn't count as real literature anyway. And you know what I mean? Like, that people only care then. Like, if it's something they liked. And it's like, whatever. And I just can't be bothered to give a crap. Really. Yeah, I feel really bad for series completionists because
could not be me.
Like, no, absolutely not. Like, I don't care if it gets better after, like, if it's a 6-book series and books like 3 and 4 and 5 are garbage, but like the final book, I'm okay, cool. It's great for you guys. More power to you. I'm not gonna bother. Like, if I'm curious enough, and I've done this plenty of times with individual books and with series, if the series is like fully published, I'll just look it up online. What happens if I'm
like to your point? Like when people say that, like, oh, but the final one is better. Like that's like I don't want to be told I have to read it because the final one is better. But I like to know. Like I like this information to be available. That like, well, the 3rd and 4th ones are bad, but the 5th one is actually really good. So then I can make an informed decision. And be like, is it worth it to me to push through? Did I love books 1 and 2 enough to where I think the 5th one it might be worth it to get there? And then because like that's useful information, but don't tell me I have to read this because the 5th one is good. Like I do not.
I definitely don't. And yeah, it's different because I mean, like rating a series, like like you said, like on Goodreads and stuff, you can't really do that, and like on Amazon. So like, if you rate a series on your channel or something, like it doesn't matter, and it's your choice to do that or to not do it. But yeah, as far as like reviewing and saying whether or not you like a series, even if you only read one book, if you didn't like that book because of the writing style or the plot or the characters or whatever, and you're like, I don't want to continue, like, yeah, you're allowed to do that.
Wait, but also, I think that nobody gets mad at you if you say you like a series that you haven't finished. They get mad at you if you say you don't like a series that you haven't finished.
Exactly.
You can be a fan from book one, no problem.
Yes, but you can't hate it from book one. That's unacceptable. If they liked it.
We've been talking so long. It's like, oh yeah, I still have to answer.
No. I'm just contemplating. I mean, so for me, first impressions are really big, and then endings are really big, right? So for me, like, I need something to, and when I say first impressions, like I have what I consider a relatively low bar for, like, okay, like if you can meet certain things, like you can have my interest enough to definitely make me finish your book. And if it's just this much enough, I'll maybe read book 2 or 3 or whatnot, right? And if it ends really well, then I'm like, okay, I'm always hoping that something ends really well. So, because while you guys were thinking, I was like, okay, like I will qualify myself as a completionist, right? But I'm like, have I read any series or pushed myself through a series where I like totally hated it, right? And I was like, well, there's maybe one series I can think of that I just really didn't like, but I pushed myself to finish. And that was probably like Lev Grossman's The Magicians. Like I decently liked the first book. Second book was okay. And I was like, all right, I'm ready to read 2 books. It's only 3 books. I'll finish it. But like, I don't think there's any like 10 book, 15 book series, 8, even 6 or 7 book series that I'm like, I'm on book 3 and I'm like, oh, someone said the next 2 books are trash and but book 7 is amazing. I got to finish it. We read that trash Ice Planet Barbarians book, and I didn't even know there's like 50 of those, and I will never touch another one of those books again. So I mean, I DNF that series, right? So I will never read an Ice Planet Barbarian, even though
Get that
series
I'm
a
so
break,
surprised.
bro. Give it a break.
I still have a bone to pick with Q for that series, but anyway, but yes, I will never read that series. So I'm okay saying I DNF that series, and I'm okay, like you guys said, saying, hey, I read book 1 of 15. It wasn't for me. I don't think this is for me. I think some of the romance books we read that, like, I think they're part of a series. But no, even some sequel series, like sometimes the author do a trilogy and a sequel trilogy. I've heard not so good things about that. What's the girl that shoots the arrows? Katniss and them.
Hunger Games.
Hunger Games. Like I heard there's some more books of those, and I'm like, people are like, yeah, no, and I'm like, well, cool. I'm good with the 3 I read. And they were decently okay. I don't need to read it, So I'm cool with not like hopping on a sequel series or a 10, 15 book series where I read book 1 and 2 I wasn't finished. But most trilogies, like if the book is just okay enough for me to be okay with, that's a lot of okays, I can read book 2 and 3 and be done and say, I didn't like that trilogy, but I finished it. So yeah, that's just how my brain operates.
So if Lev Grossman came out with another trilogy,
I wouldn't read
same world, you wouldn't read it.
I wouldn't read it. I wouldn't read it.
So that's one example of a book that the first book I was like, I can't do it, and he was like, no, just keep going. And so I read book 2, and I was like, no. He's like, keep going. And then we read book 3, and then we looked at each other. We were like, we could have read anything else. Like it was just.
You could have been reading Ice Planet Barbarians that whole time.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Right. You could have been at book 25 because they're like 200 pages, and you out here like. One day I'm gonna just make you like, because he got me to keep reading that, so I'm gonna pick a series that I'm like, okay.
You didn't like it, but you didn't despise it, bro.
I didn't despise it. I thought it was funny. I thought the thing was funny, and I felt like that's what it was
page 10 of Ice Planet Barbarian. I was like, bro, why are we reading this? Why? Like, I don't like this at all,
And I told him, I said, DNF it, bro. Like, just don't finish it. I will. And he couldn't stop.
Yeah.
And that's his problem. He has a problem.
I do. You're right.
We need to sit down and talk about that. But
we're talking about it right now. It's therapeutic for me. I'm getting it out. I'm learning things as we talk this out. So I appreciate you all.
Yeah. No, but series wise, I agree with what everyone was saying. Like I can't rate a series, but I mean, I feel like I can say it's not for me, and I didn't like it because of X, Y, and Z. Yeah, no, I feel it.
I think too that all of us are kind of saying the same thing. Like, obviously, if on Goodreads there's the entirety of the series that you're able to rate, we'd be like, well, I mean, I can't rate that. I haven't read the entirety of it. But I think it's also something that just by the nature of Booktube, for a lot of people being a casual thing where you feel like you're talking to a friend, or sometimes you are talking to friends, that you're not constantly censoring, okay, I got to make sure I say this exactly, because you might be like, ugh, I hated that series. You might say that even though you know I haven't read the whole series. I'm not saying the whole series. I can give you an opinion. You know what I mean?
There's no
question. Question to all you guys. Do you guys buddy read with people? Like, do you guys buddy? Would you DNF a buddy read? Like, if you had a buddy and you got like, and your buddy was like, oh, let's keep going. Like, and you're like, I'm not feeling this. Like, would you hop out on your buddy? Just jump out on him? Like, would you do it?
Yes. All the time. I do it all the time.
You would do it, Jashana? Leanne, would you do it?
I've done it many times.
I already barely DNF things that I'm reading by myself. I'm never gonna DNF.
I would feel bad, right? I personally feel bad, and I know I guilt trip Q that a lot. I think that's probably why I don't, because we buddy read like 90% of the stuff, and so if like he's feeling it, I'm like, all right, like I'm gonna keep it going. And like again, because my threshold is semi low, like most of the time I'm like, even if I don't like it, I'm complaining to him of why I don't like it. And we're having conversation, so we're gonna keep going so we can talk more about why I don't like it. So I think that also adds into it because we buddy read a lot of stuff. So I'm curious, like again, like if you guys were buddy reading, like maybe you wouldn't.
Yeah, Jashana and I.
So Jashana chooses violence.
I'm out.
Like multiple people. The Crown of Gilded Bones. I was buddy reading that with 2 other people, and I buddy read those first 3 books with one of the same with Vish from Books with V. We read the first 2. We both kind of wanted to DNF the second one, but we like pushed through, and we were glad we pushed through because the ending was like, okay, cool. Book 3 is gonna be great. And then I got to page 450, whatever, and I was like, I'm out, you guys. I can't do it anymore. And like they were both like, I get it, like it makes sense. I was like, tell me what happens, because I'm not gonna.
So Jashana and I have known each other not as long as you fellas have, but we've known each other for quite a while now. And the very first time that we didn't even know each other that well yet, but we're like, we should buddy read a book, like we're friends who like books. And I stopped reading the book basically immediately, and Jashana read the whole thing, and I was like, oh no, terrible. I was like, I'm sorry. And she's like, I mean, I didn't really like it. And I was like,
what book was it? I don't remember.
It was the 5th season.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I still need to, but I know, I'm sorry, Jess. I need to pick it up again. Because the thing is, I truly did not give that book a good enough chance. I
didn't know quite this story, but I was aware that these ladies were not fans of The Wolf or the 5th season. So I think you're right, Jashana, on your tier ranking. I don't know why we're friends.
I didn't even give it a fair chance. And I did like a books I want to give another chance video, and like people got to vote, and that one won, so I should be reading it before the end of the year. And then we'll find out if I was just in a mood or if I really don't like it. But yeah, I also, involving another person in this video, Jess and I, and then Jessie May, and then poor Abby. So we started the Bone Chips, and I was like, I don't like this writing style at all. I feel like I hardly read any of it. Jess read like 40%. Jessie, I'm not sure how many she read, and Abby read the whole thing, and I was like, oh no, I'm sorry. And that's supposed to be a buddy read like via our channels. Like we were supposed to do a live show. We're like, no, because otherwise it would just all of us being like, if we had pushed through, it would have just been all of us being like, I didn't enjoy this at all. And poor Jessie and I, her and I, the first few buddy reads of the year, we didn't like any of them. We're like, we can't do another one that we don't like. So, but I will say, if I had a friend consistently being the TG to Q, and they were like, no, we have to keep going, I feel like I would buckle. I'd be like, well, okay. But if I have Jashana and Jess, who is like DNF for self-care, and I don't know, I'm just not feeling it, I don't feel bad at all.
I think we entertain each other when either one of us dislikes the book, and I think that's what keeps us going.
Well, I feel like it's similar to like when you like watch a bad movie and you make fun of it as you go. Like, it's the same.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just like what's that movie we watched that we thought was just like Spring Breakers.
Spring
Have
Breakers.
any of y'all ever seen the Spring
No, but
Breakers?
I've seen people do commentary on it.
Oh
But I
my
haven't.
It's probably
gosh.
one of the worst movies
We
ever.
went to the movie theater and we're like, what the hell are we watching? And so I don't know how long ago this movie came out,
Like,
but we lived
15
together
years
at that
ago.
time. Yeah, we lived together. And I bought when it came out on Blu-ray, I bought the Blu-ray just so we could watch it and talk junk about it and laugh at all the stupid stuff that happened in the movie. So it's like one of those situations where it's like, you know, I might dislike the book or hate it and he loves it. And so I'll either try to talk so much junk about it to make him mad or to make him laugh at it and try to make me keep reading it. So that's kind of like what pushes us to keep going. So even though I talk junk about him making me continue to read something, it's usually because of that.
But finishing a bad book too, I feel like it's, you know, like those t-shirts you get that say like I hiked the Grand Canyon, like I did it.
Yeah.
Like that's finishing a bad book. I'm like, I didn't quit. I did this whole thing and now feel my rage.
Yes. I concur.
I mean, I had a friend, this was on Bookstagram, and we hate read the entire the Raven cycle.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, and we hated the rest, but it was such a great time that we bonded over.
Right?
Lena's leaving. She's slowly inching away.
Yeah, I really I'm thinking of those books and I'm thinking of your taste, and I do not understand where those two intersect.
Welcome to
That is a complicated
doesn't
lady.
know how to predict my reading taste.
Yeah.
Alan in the last video being like, you must not read, Leanna, because how can you possibly like this book? And then no, I just I will say,
I mean, the things you talk about, the way you talk about them, and then Maggles, Steve Otter, and the Raven cycle, the circles do not intersect. I don't get it.
I gave Maggie Stiefvater one of the highest accolades, which was that her writing style is to me reminiscent of Neil Gaiman, who's my favorite author. So
I haven't even read it, and I could tell you that was what you were gonna say, just because I know. Yeah.
Ooh.
Anyway, so I feel like this is maybe the most fun question, depending on our answers, or it could be kind of sad. But what makes a book an instant DNF? Like, what is something you come across? You're like, no, I'm not gonna keep reading.
That's hard. I mean, it depends. Usually, like writing, if the writing style is just blatantly, it's not going to work for me. Sometimes that might be too flowery. Sometimes it's too choppy or lack of punctuation or something. Usually, if it's an early DNF, something with the writing for me, or if maybe a character is introduced and we get to know them super well and they seem like the fucking worst, or like especially if it's a romance and I'm like, yeah, I don't care about this love interest. So those are my things.
for me, it's definitely the prose, because like the story and characters always have the capacity to possibly get better, or like there will be a reveal that makes this interesting. Like that can always possibly become something. Like even the worst books, you're like, well, maybe it gets better. But the prose, that is not going to change. So if the prose is bad, I'm like on page 1, I'm like, this person cannot write. And that's just as clear. So like, I cannot read these words for 500 pages.
I think that's, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, for me, most of the time, it's honestly, I guess I would say like the writing style / like the tone. There's been quite a few DNFs where I'm like, this is too juvenile for me, right? Like I can't. It's like young adult. What?
I said boundary side.
Yeah, the dialogue was too juvenile, and I was like, no, I don't like it. That's usually why. I have had a couple times where like the content where I'm just like, oh no, only like once or two. Like one was the land of love and drowning or something. And I was like, ooh, Caribbean author, like Caribbean, like literary fiction. Cool. Sign me up. And it said like what I had heard about it was like complex family dynamics or some crap. I was like, all right, whatever. Right off the bat in like the second page, we have a grown man internally in his mind fetishizing and like sexualizing a literal child. And I was like, oh, maybe that's okay. Maybe he's not like a prominent character and like that was just one thing. All right. No. It's his daughter, and there's incest, pedophilia. The whole book, apparently, I went and like looked at reviews after like a couple pages. Like, is this what this is about? Yeah, like the whole book was about two daughters and one getting special treatment from their dad and like their relationship with each other, the girls. But I was like, no, I don't want to read this. I'm not saying it's like a bad book, but I don't care to read it personally. But more often than not, it'll just be like the writing style is just not my jam, either too juvenile or like Catherine M. Valente. I tried a couple times and I was like, I cannot. What is happening? I'm so confused. I'm too dumb for this. Can't do it.
I'm so shocked that you hated Catherine M. Valente when I like her writing.
Yeah, sorry.
So
I like Deathless. I read that. I liked that.
Yeah. Did you read Deathless, Shoshana?
Like what?
Did you read Deathless? Was that one of the Catherine Valente books you read?
No, I didn't read any Catherine Valente books like DNF.
Well, I mean, is that one of the ones you tried?
No, that wasn't one I tried. Radiance is the one I can think of. I was like, what is going on here now?
I was gonna say, TG, for a while there, you look like you were praying.
I was contemplating. Again, I was taking in the information, trying to put it back out. No, I think you all hit on two that probably go for me. First being writing style, and when I say writing style, it has to be bad writing, right? So for me, I think of like Robin Hobb and like Gaga Roquet are like two of the most like poetic, like flowetry, like their writing is just breathtaking.
Well,
and then like
the writing's bad, like Robin Hobb. I was just like, what?
No, it's amazing. Robin Hobb is amazing. Like her and Gaga Roquet, like they're like poetic writers. It's just amazing. And then Stephen King is like just literal. Like it's like I stabbed a man in the gut. Like it's just there's nothing flowery or like, you know, read between the lines. No, it's straight. But they're like, I like them both. Just like they're different, but I like them both. And then you just have bad writing, like someone just trash writing. So if the writing is just bad, then yeah, that'll turn me off. And then the other thing has to be kind of what Jashana said, like the main character I'm following. If like I despise the main character, like if we're just book just focused on like us being behind the eyes of one character, and this person is just like I just don't like them at all. Like not even like I can't get their motivations, but like they're repulsive to me. Then I probably wouldn't be able to read the book because I just like I'm you know, like when I read a book, like I'm almost in like a Power Ranger, like Voltron, like, oh, I'm in the main character. And like, so like I'm driving behind him and he's taking me there. And so if I'm driving behind this repulsive, disgusting figure person, then like I for my own spirit, like I got to get away from it. So yeah, those are my two.
I have a hot tolerance. I can fight through. Well, I said hot tolerance than DNF stuff, but I'll say this: if I have a trigger, kind of like what Jashana said, in like the beginning, then I'm like, all right, nah, I'm out. Like I can't do it. And that's how I DNF'd it at the end, because I was like, whoa, how? There was no sign of this anywhere. And so yeah, it's usually with something that triggers me, and I'm like, that's trash. I can't do it. But I like Leanne's what she was saying about prose. Like if the prose is good, then usually they'll get me. It's usually just that if the writing is trash and terrible, I'm like, all right. So trash writing, triggers, and I'm out.
It's interesting because I think that there are certain, like, I know I feel bad. I know we've brought it from Blood and Ash a few times. I don't think that writing was poetic at all. But it was one of those where I'm like, okay, this is like watching like fun, silly movie almost, where I'm like, I'm never going to love the writing, but I think that this is what?
I said, but it was like a fun time.
Yeah, it was, it was ridiculous, but It was like, okay, that's the thing though, like this is ridiculous in my opinion, right? And so I'm like, I'm gonna come to it like knowing it's ridiculous. Then there are some books like Strange the Dreamer, which on the other end isn't typically a writing style I absolutely love. I know, just trying to get out of here. It's not, because it's really flowery and it's really like she describes like emotions as colors, and like it's a little artsy, but I loved the characters so much and like the themes and everything that I was like, okay, well, this is gonna work for me. But there are some instances where I feel like the writing is good, but and it's not that I feel like I'm too stupid, but I'm like, I don't want to have to work this hard when I read for entertainment. Because if I want to work my brain, I'll go play my violin or I'll go like read about issues in the world and try to think like, okay, what do I feel about this issue? Or what are ways that I can try to help with this thing or what, like, I guess that's not really an example of working your brain, but I just mean, I usually come to books, even if it's a darker subject matter or something, I usually come to books as something to enjoy or get fulfillment out of or learn from. Yeah, to some degree. I mean, with like nonfiction, it's a little different. But I don't know that my husband is the complete opposite. He'll read books. I'm like, what the heck are you reading? And he'll describe it. And it's like eccentric and absurd and super convoluted. And I'm like, and this is fun for you, but it is, which is great. And I'm glad that it is for him. But I feel like there are some books that I'll pick up and I'm just like, I don't want to work this hard to know what's going on. And that doesn't mean the book is bad or that the writing is trash, but I also think, and this is kind of a slight side tangent, so I'll keep it short, but going to school for education and music education specifically, the whole idea is that when you're teaching, especially young kids, you want to break all these complicated, complex things down to like their most basic, simple form so that the person can then start to learn and like come to enjoy it. And then you kind of step up into other things because the next thing up it's like a little step instead of being a jump. And sometimes I go into books and I'm like, I feel like I can tell this author knows what they're doing and I can tell they know so much about the craft of writing that this is going to be appreciated by people that also know a lot about the craft of writing. But I like want it. I don't know that I want it to be quite so much like, I don't know if that makes any sense. I guess what I'm saying is I think there's, what we're saying as trash writing. And then I think there's writing that's more simplistic, but not necessarily trash. It's like the effort has to be made to make it flow and make it like something you engage with. You don't even realize you're reading almost because you're so captivated. So I suppose that was all kind of nonsensical, but
I think it's an author's job is to convey a story to you in a way that is comprehensible and enjoyable. And if they fail in that, then that's debatable and it's a matter of opinion, but that is like what an author's like as part of their responsibility is not just to like have an idea and then hopefully you understand it. Their job is to like convey that idea to you in a way that is palatable.
Yeah. And I guess to say, because you're like, it's up for opinion. If it's something that in my opinion, I don't like love, because I feel bad. I feel like I always end up mentioning Malazan, but Malazan's kind of known for being like that, where Steven Erikson purposefully like withholds information from you, or he's like wording things. Because Alan will be like, he'll send us a snippet of the book and be like, this is what he could have said, and then this is what he ended up saying, and it's just so many words to say this one small thing. But then as far as a specific you guys are talking about triggers and stuff. I'm so sorry because I know you like Tagana a lot. I didn't start Tagana, but I started Under Heaven, which I've heard isn't one of his better ones. And just like for one, the whole beginning of the book, it was like nobody's talking. It's so much description. And then when we finally do get around to stuff, it's like we just killed this one lady, and the dude's like, I gotta try to have sex with her body before it's cold. And I'm like, geez, okay. Which I'm like, okay, well, that guy is clearly, because then the other guy's like, no, don't do that. And I was like, okay, well, that guy is not for us. So, that's good. But then he's like, it's sure been a long time since I've slept with a lady. And then randomly he's in a room, and the woman outside his door, who's like his guard, she comes in and she can like tell that he's not slept with a lady in a long time. And I'm like, what? Why is like men wanting to sleep with women such a thing in this? I mean, I understand it's a thing for everybody, right? But I mean, it was so constant that I was like, I don't want to keep reading about dudes who really want to bang. So stuff like that, where after a while I'm like, I'm not saying the book is bad, but I'm just not enjoying this. So like I started Prince of Thorns, and not a spoiler, the beginning of the book, he basically is like raping and pillaging. And I'm like, cool. But I went into that knowing that he's a bad person. So it's like, I don't fault the book for that you're writing a story about this bad person. And I didn't DNF it. I read the whole thing and I didn't like it. But I'm like, well, that's one I could have DNF'd because I didn't love reading about that.
I think Stranger Dreamer is probably the most popular, beloved book that I've DNF'd.
Ooh, Joshana.
So you just said, Eller, gave me like, it reminded me of like a point, which is that it's sometimes the fact that you may have a mistaken belief about what the project of a book is. So like sometimes picking up a book, and it's not even that like it's exactly what you thought it was, but like, oh, I didn't really care for this, or I didn't like how this other. It's just like I didn't realize this book was this. So like when like rating a book badly because you're rating it based on I didn't expect it to be this and it was this other thing that I don't want, therefore 1 star, it's kind of unfair. And so like if you pick up a book like Ice Planet Barbarians, if you pick it up and you're like, well, this was a smutty book about aliens, you're like, well, yes it is. Like that was the project and it did the thing that it set out to do. So like I know that for me personally, like I didn't rate The Heroes very highly by Joe Abercrombie the first time I read it, because I didn't really realize what the project of the book was. And then when I reread it, this time I went into it knowing what his kind of goal was when he was writing that. And I was like rating it now based on that understanding. And I liked it a whole lot better because my expectations were different. But that said, like there are plenty of books where like I'm like halfway through, I'm like, wow, this is definitely like Vicious. The first time I read it, I thought it was going to be this like kind of historical, like The Prestige. I thought it was going to be like that. And the cover kind of looked like that. And I'm like, the first few pages, like they're in college, they have computers. I was just like, what? This is not what I thought this was going to be.
Where you're like, I thought this was going to be like back in the day Japan. They're talking about video games and stuff. What is this? And then, yeah. So
I feel like that happened with Black Leopard, Red Wolf for me, but I DNF'd it at like 50%. Because I was like, I was not explained this book properly, like by any of the marketing for that was so weird.
It's Game of Thrones.
Yeah, and it was not. And like, it didn't mean it was a bad book. It just, if I had known what it actually was, I wouldn't have even been interested. You know, I wouldn't have even picked it up had I known, because I would have known like, that's not for me. And yeah, then I picked it up and I was like, am I having a fever dream? What is am I on acid? Like, I feel like I'm on acid reading this book because it was just so literary and like folk tale-y, and it definitely felt like a folk tale being told from someone who was like tripping acid, and that's I think what it was like kind of supposed to be. And like, yeah, had I known that, I would have even tried it.
Yeah, but I mean, kind of on this tangent of the project of the book, but because sometimes, obviously, and this happens because I don't like to read full synopsis of a book because I feel like they give too much away. So sometimes maybe I just read a little bit and I'm like, oh, well, this is kind of different. But I do think sometimes books are marketed, or the synopsis, they give you these false expectations of like, they set up the whole thing in this wrong way, and then you go in and it's like, what?
Yeah.
No, this is not it at all. So when you, Leanna, when you're talking about the heroes, sorry, I haven't read any Joe Abercrombie yet. Okay. And when you said then you understood the project, is it from him, what he said, or like, what do you mean that you understood it better the second time?
So the Heroes, like with all of his standalones, he kind of had a different project in mind, and each one is kind of based on films, because he was a film editor before he was an author, so he's kind of a film buff. And in particular, the Heroes is kind of inspired by All Quiet on the Western Front, and I kind of maybe knew that. I don't think I did. But basically, like he was just trying to write a few days of battle. That's the whole book. And it's not like there's this like, it's not, I mean, it is tied to the rest of the world. There's characters you recognize, but it's not like a normal book where you're like a beginning, middle, and end. There's like a quest or a thing we're trying to achieve or whatever. No, it's just like there's this battle and there's a bunch of perspectives from which you see like 3 days of battle. And that's the whole book. And so like when I read it, I knew it was an Abercrombie book and I knew it was a first law book, and like, okay, it's going to be violent, whatever. But like I was halfway through the book and I was like, there's no plot. I was like, I know people complain that Abercrombie books meander, but I was like, there's literally no plot. There's just this battle. And then like realizing that, well, yeah, this book is just trying to do that. Like, how do I write a book where I'm just like putting you in this battle from every perspective that I possibly can to show you like the decisions being made, the boots on the ground, the stuff that goes wrong, the people dying, and like what is actually achieved, like from like where we started and where we ended, like did the battle do anything? And like that's the whole book. And so like when I went into it the second time, I knew that, both from having read it before and knowing that was what his goal was. And I was like, well, if that's what you're trying to do, actually like you did a really good job with that. But the first time I was like, where is the plot? Where is the plot?
I'll add too that, and I don't think you like disagree with this statement necessarily, but I'll also add that I think it's okay to go into something like even if you know what the project is, you can still not like it. Like you can, because what I think sometimes, I don't know if it's like on accident or if people really believe this, but sometimes there's this idea like, well, do you really know what the author intended though? Because if you knew what the author intended, you would probably think the book was actually really good. And you're like, I kind of think the book sucked a lot. I don't think it was the author's intention for it to suck, because then they succeeded. That's how I feel sometimes.
I have issue with that in like TV shows and movies when they're like, oh well, you didn't know the background of this thing. If you would have known that, then you would have took it where I'm like, well, that's not my job. Like however you deliver it and like I take it, like if I feel like your delivery wasn't good, yes, I shouldn't have to go scour the net and find out these background things or find out your state of mind. And that's what you were trying to portray. Like, that's not my fault that I don't know these things. I'm coming into it as a casual viewer who turns it on and watches it. Like you should give enough context clues or enough things to help me figure out what you were trying to deliver. Now, if people want to be, above and smart in however they deliver things, and you want to put stuff out. Okay, cool, but like you can't. Like I hate when people, because it almost to me sounds like, oh, you weren't smart enough to take in what I was trying to do. Like almost elitist. Yeah. Like, oh, if you would have been smart enough to pick that up, you would have known. I'm like, no, like you just didn't deliver it well. Like I feel like that there's an argument on those two things. So
I very much agree. Did anybody have anything to add to that before I go?
Oh, just really quick. I mean, I didn't mean to say that you can't dislike the project of a book, just that like in terms of like an instant DNF is like realizing just like not that this book is bad, but just that like, oh, this is not the book that I thought it was. And like, this is not what I'm here for.
I have one more I have a few other things, but there's one that I feel like we haven't really gotten into. And I sort of wrote two different questions, but I think they go hand in hand. So this one said, do you ever feel like you have an obligation to continue certain books? And then the next one is, do you think it's fair to DNF something that has a heavy topic if the topic isn't something that has an impact on you? So what I mean by that is, like, let's say, like I'm somebody living in America and I'm reading about this tragedy that's occurring in another country. And it's a really heavy book and it's difficult to read. And I'm not literally affected. Like it's one thing if, I kind of touched on as being a girl, if I'm reading something and it's like, look at all these women I want to sleep with. And sometimes I'm like, I don't want to read that because it's not my thing. But if it doesn't actually affect you and you're like, it's just really sad. It's like really depressing me. And you're like, it sort of comes from a place of privilege because it's like, you don't want to be sad hearing about these things that other people are living through sort of. So do you feel like there's an obligation, even if it's not something affecting, like if it's not affecting you personally, it's not something you experience, do you feel like there's this expectation, like maybe you should so that you gain more insight? Or what about if you don't really like the book, then is it fair to DNF it knowing that it's so important to groups that maybe don't get represented as often? So I think this is potentially a more, I feel like this one is a more nuanced sort of question.
So wait, are we doing both at the same time? Or
we just put them however together? You, whatever aspects of the question that you feel like answering.
The first one was, can you put up the first one again? Sorry.
This one's a little more straightforward. Do you ever feel like you have an obligation to continue certain books? Do you think it's fair? Yeah. The only obligation if like maybe if I said something specifically on my channel, like I want to do a standalone review or advanced reader copies, like I'm really struggling right now because I got a NetGalley e-arc for a book that I think it just came out. And I also got an audio one separately because I was like, maybe the audio will be better. And they're both awful. And I'm struggling. I'm just like, that's the only time I really fight myself on DNFing. Like, I'm like, no, like in advance, because I feel like, it's a privilege to get something early, to do a review. So I'm like, and I don't request that many things. So I'm like, but, I don't know what's going on. I don't know
the narrator it's just too much. But I feel like I have to finish it because it was an advanced copy. That's really like my only time of like an obligation. But there are other books that this will kind of tie into the other one that take me more time to DNF as well. Like if it's in my video I was talking about a book called Real Life by Brandon. I can't think of his last name. And I think it was like longlisted for the Booker or something, like acclaimed. And I was like, oh, well, I can't just DNF this book. You know, this is like a literary acclaimed book. Or if it is like a topic, books I was reading, someone recommended, and now I'm thinking about it, I forgot to put it in my DNF video. It was like a memoir by an Indigenous author. And they're like, oh, the audiobook. And I was listening to it, and it almost like is in like verse, and which isn't my thing, but I felt bad because I'm like, I need to be reading stories from other marginalized groups. And I did DNF it because I couldn't pay attention just because of the way it was delivered. But I did feel bad. So like on stuff like that, I feel like I should finish them because I need to be more educated on a certain topic, or because I have the privilege to just read about it, that I should finish it. But sometimes in the delivery, it just doesn't work. You know, sometimes a writing style or something just isn't for you. And so I try to be mindful of that. But I do feel like a pressure if I'm going to read something about a topic, about something happening that doesn't affect me, to try to finish it. It doesn't always work.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself and then I just disappeared. I was like, for me, it's entirely dependent on why I've picked up the book. So if it's a book that I just picked up for funsies, and aside from my general desire to always finish everything so I can review it, which like even then there are things I DNF, because I'm like, I just don't have anything to say about this. I don't even want to review it, so just forget it. But like if I pick something up because I've heard like this is one of those like seminal texts in some way, that this is relevant to the genre, relevant to the history of literature, relevant to whatever. And I've picked it up for that reason, because I know that this piece of literature affected something, like affected literature. Like I've picked up a few like kind of sci-fi classics, SFF classics this year, and like some I like, some I don't, but I picked it up because I was like, this started a thing, or like people were inspired by this and I want to see how and why. In which case, like, even if I don't like it, like I was reading this to kind of see where people were pulling inspiration from. So it's kind of more for my own edification that I'm reading this anyway. And then for like a topic in the world or something that doesn't affect me, again, like it depends on, is this fiction or nonfiction? And then like, is it a topic that there's literally no other book that does this? Because odds are it's very unlikely, depending on, I mean, there are some things that like almost no one has written about, in which case, okay, this person didn't do a good job, but they're the only one writing about this, so I got to read this. But for most things, there are other authors, both in fiction and nonfiction, covering these topics. So I feel like I'm doing this like world event or this situation or this representation a disservice by forcing myself to read something that I think is handling it poorly, or in a way that is not going to make me understand it or feel it or whatever. So like, again, fiction or nonfiction, like I'll just be like, well, I still want to learn about this, or I still think it's important to read something with this kind of representation, but this isn't it. And I will just find something that does this better for me. And like, that's on me to find, but like, it's not helping anybody for me to just force myself to read this. I don't think it's doing it well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I mean, if I'm ever reading something, I mean, first of all, I don't feel any obligation to finish anything. It's been well established. Like if I don't want to read it, I'm not going to read it. Is what it boils down to. But even e-arcs, I feel real bad sometimes, and especially recently. I don't know why. I do this like once a year. I don't request stuff on NetGalley very often, but I do it like once a year where I go in there and I'm like, request. And then I'm like, dang it, Shoshana, you have all these ebooks to read now, and I don't really like ebooks all that much. And then I'm just like trudging through these things. And I've had a couple of DNFs from NetGalley recently. And like, I kind of feel bad. And like, I definitely recognize that like, it's obviously like a privilege to be able to get that. But also like, there's a lot of them where like, just have an account, you request it, you'll get it. Like I'm not special because I got this. Like everybody got this copy that requested it, basically, type of thing. And most of the time, by the time I get to the books, they're published already. So, like
sometimes they don't even approve them until way later too.
All of these I had since like January.
I'm just thinking about Alex when he's like, I'll get a NetGalley account, and then he was showing what he requested. I was like, do you like that one series? Because that's like the 3rd or 4th book, and he's like, I had no idea. I'm like, Alex
went crazy.
He's like, whoops.
But yeah, I don't even feel an obligation with that. Like I'll DNF those too. Like I try not to, but like if I'm just struggling, I'm gonna put it down and it's whatever. But I did recently though with that one, I DNF'd the ebook, but then I picked up a physical copy because I was like, am I being too harsh just because it's an ebook and I'm sick of ebooks right now? And I was. Turns out I was. And then with like heavier topics, yeah, same thing as like what Leanna was saying. Like if I'm just not vibing with I'm never going to like DNF like something like that, especially if it's nonfiction and it's just like really sad and terrible. I'm just not that like sensitive, I guess. Like I don't get like, oh, my heart, I can't continue reading this because it's too sad. Like it might be sad, but like that's okay. Like I'll continue. But yeah, if like the writing style isn't working for me at all, the delivery of it isn't working for me at all, the formatting, whatever the case may be, like there's someone else talking about this that I can go pick that up. And that would usually happen with fiction for me. With nonfiction, it might take me a long time. I've been reading this book about the history of Cuba for about a year because I just like it's like a textbook. It's literally a textbook. So I'll just pick it up every now and then and like read a chapter. But then I'm like, okay, that was a lot of like academia for me. I'm good for a while. But yeah, with fiction, I'm not going to force myself to read this specific book just because it's about an important topic. I'll find a different book that's talking about it.
Yeah. Feel that. I've been trying to read Black Reconstruction, which is good, but it's so dense, and it's one of those books where I'm like, am I too dumb for this? Like, I'm buddy reading it with Bethany, and so she's smarter than I am. So I'm like, Bethany, can you tell me what he means? I'm not what did he mean right here?
I feel like nonfiction is really good to buddy read.
Yes, because
we're like bringing in the collective knowledge of several people.
I'm like, you may know, or you may know. So yeah.
What were the 2 questions again, Elle? Can you pop them up?
Yeah. So one of them is, do you ever feel like you have an obligation to continue certain books, so not DNF them? And then, and that can be simple as like, I mentioned it on my channel now, I feel like I have to sort of thing, or it can be more than that. And then this one is, do you think it's fair to DNF something with a heavy topic if the topic isn't something that has an impact on you? So like the example, I feel like, you know, Alex, for example, sorry, Alex, if he ends up watching this, but he read a book and, you know, Alex is a guy, and somebody had commented once, like, no men ever address like the sexism in this book or something. And it's like, if Alex had been reading something that was super involving like sexual assault or something, he's like, this just makes me sad. If like sexual assault of like a woman or something, and he DNF'd it, then it's like, you know, if that makes sense, like, oh, well, maybe it's good to gain that insight, even if it makes you uncomfortable or sad, those kinds of things.
Yeah. As far as obligation, no. I mean, I never read off of obligation. It's just a quirk in me that feels like, oh, I need to finish reading this book or whatnot. So I don't think there's any obligation, just like, you know, authors don't have an obligation to continue to write more books or a book about you want. So it has to go both ways, even though, again, I want them to write what I want. But it goes both ways. So only obligation is contractual. Like if you sign a contract to read a book, and
hard agree. Just want that on record.
Yeah, I do. So no obligation. And then on the other one, as far as like the heavy topic, like I also agree with Leanne. Like I need to evaluate first, why did I pick up this book? If it was just for fun or like for pure entertainment, like, oh, you know, two magical beings are going to drive spaceships around the universe, and I think it's stupid, and I'm like, I'm not being entertained properly, then okay, cool. Like I have no, you know, qualms with dropping that book, you know, even though I probably won't. But the reasoning in my head, no qualms. But if it's like a heavy topic, you know, indigenous groups, something about assault, something about any of these really heavy topics, and like I'm in my feelings or emotions, then I would just like I kind of would do a self-evaluation, like, okay, like what's wrong with me? Like, why am I upset about this? You know, why am I not connecting with this? Is it delivery, the writing style, or is it something with me, some sort of mental block or energy that I have in myself that I need to think about and talk about? And then I'll either need to pick it up or like you guys said, find some other avenue to kind of get to whatever point they were talking about. So that's how I would approach a heavier topic book. Just kind of like evaluate, like, why am I going through these emotions? Is it something my past? Is something I'm dealing with? And then try to figure out, is this the best avenue to reach whatever they're trying to target? So.
Yeah, that right when you're talking about the evaluate, when I was reading in a nonfiction book, Ace, about asexuality, I had a hard time getting into it. And like some of it, I was like, it was like making me mad, or I was like in my feelings, but I did that. Like, hold on. Why are we feeling this way?
Right.
And
yeah.
somebody is talking to, you know, people who are not asexual and da-da-da. And I'm like, I know she's not coming for me, but kind of she was. And checking in, I was like, okay, I need to continue. Like, I'm glad I did, because I learned a lot about asexuality and just a whole lot of stuff. But yeah, because sometimes it's like, you can feel attacked or like called out.
All right.
Sort of thing.
No, that's a good example. I like that.
Yeah. So, echoing what TG said from that first question, if it's not contractual, I don't feel any obligation. And even if we put it on our TBRs or whatever, if I just don't get to it, we just don't get to it. Or if I don't like it, I don't like it. I mean, I feel like it should be known fact that, you know, we're humans, we're busy. It might just not rock with us at the moment. So I'm out. And then the second one, I really like Jess and TG's answer. Leanne, everyone's answer was great. I want to say, for me, if it's a heavier topic, it depends on if I know what I'm getting into. I think that matters. And then the other part is, if I like the book in general, like if I like the style of writing, if it's not something that I would DNF for any other reason, then I feel like I can, you know, fight through and get through it, and, you know, do that evaluation, like, you know, what's really going on, that I didn't have awareness on this issue. Maybe, you know, at this point I should look into it, you know, things like that. So it all just depends for me.
Another, on that same point, like there's some like Netflix or TV shows that come out. One, like, for example, that I still haven't watched, but I tend to watch, like the Central Park 5, right? Like I understand and have a awareness of what that all intakes, but I'm just not in the point in my spirit to take that in at this point in time. Like, it's just like, I know I'm going to be triggered by certain things, and there's certain things that, like, on that group, or, you know, things that happen to women, or just there's certain things that happen to different groups of people that I know that I'm going to feel a certain way. And like, I also know I have to go to work on Monday and log in and do my job, right? And so it's like, I don't know if I could put myself in that state and still be a good employee, be a good husband, be a good dad, be a good person. And so I was like, all right, I need a weekend, you know, to take this in, to process it and get it out and still be my normal self. So sometimes that also makes me like have to like push it to the side so I can like take these type of things in, those heavy things. So
I feel that.
I think that's what it boils down to, is like, yeah, if someone, like, if I'm, you know, myself, little white girl, and I go to read a book that's talking about a difficult topic with race and like what Black people go through in America, and I'm just like, this is sad, I don't want to read it anymore, or this is just making me uncomfortable, I don't like it. Like, yeah, that's like, no. Like, I do think that is just such a privileged thought process of just like, ew, this is making me uncomfortable or whatever. But like, when it's like you said, in your spirit, if you're like triggered by something, or just like, I can't, like, right now this is too much for me, not because it's just making me like you were saying, Jess, like reading that book where you're like, am I being attacked right now personally? And like having to like have that moment. And if someone does feel attacked, or like the author is making them uncomfortable and they just don't like it, I think that is definitely like a place of privilege and requires some reflection, versus like genuinely being triggered by something, or knowing that this topic is going to be too much for your soul at the moment. I think those are different things, you know?
Yeah, well, that's when like the DNFing is self-care. I mean, that's when like really and truly, like if you know that you don't have the emotional bandwidth for this right now, like don't do that to yourself.
And I think as far as the obligation thing, I sometimes do, even if it's just like I put this on my TBR because I'm like, oh, I told people. I told people I would, so I should. I said I would. But at the end of the day, like, you know, it is sometimes things come up and you just can't get around to everything, and that's okay. And I have to tell myself, like, it's okay. I was telling Jess that recently because I like to make to-do lists and plan way ahead on things. And sometimes if I don't get to something, because I will, like, the hateful talk in your mind of like, you're pathetic, how come you can't get anything accomplished, like that will run through my brain. I'll write in my notes like, it's okay that you didn't accomplish everything today. Like, trying to be nicer to myself. But as far as the, you know, like, do you think that you have an obligation when it comes to the heavier topics and things like that? I think it's like everything you all are saying I completely agree with. And I feel like a good example of when I felt really guilty is last year with everything happening with my dad. And, you know, like TG, you were saying, sometimes you need to kind of understand yourself, like, I can't be reading this right now and go and do all these other things. And so a lot of times the stuff I ended up picking up, I'd have to put down, and I'd pick up something lighter and fluffier. And like, that's all I could take in at the time. And which is another reason why I think all different kinds of books are important, because you never know what state of someone's life that they're currently in or emotional state. But I just am like, everything that was happening last summer, especially, I so wanted to be educating myself more and trying to like have all these other voices included in my reading. And then it was like, oh, well, dad has to go back to the hospital again, or I don't know what's happening, why dad doesn't, like, I don't know what's going on with his health, like, why is he, you know, all those things would go and happen. And then I'm like, I can't read this right now. But because I feel like the nature of the internet, you only ever see a snapshot of a person's life. And I know for myself, when I come on to make videos, I try for the most part to be like positive and happy. And hopefully, like, even if I'm just talking about books I want to read, maybe it allows somebody else to kind of escape for 10 minutes hearing like what books I want to read. And so I try to make it a happier place and not super depressing, even if I'm talking about something hard, like a harder hitting topic. But as a result, I definitely feel like there can be this idea that, oh, everything's just hunky-dory, my life's perfect, and I'm not picking up this book, like kind of what we're saying, like, oh, because it just like made me sad. I don't want to read about this stuff right now. And it's hard to, like, I for my personal taste, like, I didn't want to go into, and I still don't want to go into extreme detail about what it was like to be a caretaker for like my elderly father whose health was ailing, because it's also like, it's private and it included another person. And it's something where it's like, I don't want to go into all the details just to justify to strangers why I'm not maybe reading something else. And you can think whatever of me, but I know that I try so hard to take, not that it's an excuse that I can't ever mess up or anything, because I definitely can and do. But I know that I am trying, and that I think this is true of like posting about important topics online as well. It's not just reading about important topics. Like, there's this expectation that you always need to be on, that you always need to know everything going on. You need to share with everybody. You need to have all the links and all the answers, and you need to go in depth about everything. And it's like, and sometimes it's not something serious. Sometimes it's like you had a bad day today and you just couldn't. And I try to extend that empathy and compassion, just because I know that I don't always know what's going on behind the scenes. I do a little bit get frustrated when people use, I feel bad saying this, but there are some people that take advantage and like, they know that the internet sometimes will extend compassion. And so they'll use certain cards of like, oh, well, this was happening and this was happening. And I don't want to be cynical and believe people are being fake. If they can't get around to something important, if they're only reading fluffy things, then I'll try to understand, like, well, I don't know what's going on in their life. I don't know why they feel like that's all they can take in right now. But I don't feel like it's their job to educate themselves on, well, let me rephrase. I can only worry about myself. So I'm going to try to do the best I can. And I appreciate other people trying to hold me accountable. I think that's a good thing. But I think I put enough guilt on myself that I'll try not to put that on other people. So if that makes sense, I think it's a hard balance, because you want to make sure you're always considering other people's voices and that you're doing the self-reflection like all of you are talking about, while also trying to take care of yourself at the same time. And I think it's always a balancing act. Sorry, I feel like I got sad. Let's talk about dumb things that make us DNF books. Just kidding. Is there anything else that any of you wanted to add to the conversation?
Just in general?
No.
I support DNFing. More people should do it.
I mean, just like it is like it's not just Booktube. I mean, like there's watching Booktube and making Booktube content. And it depends on, like you pointed out, Jade, how she like how she regards her channel and the purpose of that channel. So it also depends on what you regard as the purpose of your channel or your Goodreads or whatever. So if you set yourself up as like, I mean, if you look like Roger Ebert, like he didn't just say, well, I wasn't liking this movie, so I walked out after half an hour. Like, no, you're a reviewer and you had to watch the whole movie so you could tell us it was a thumbs down. So like, it depends on if you're reading books because you're like, I'm a reviewer. It is my responsibility to finish this book and then to tell you what it was like so that you don't have to read it if you don't want to. You know what I mean? Versus if you're like, well, no, like this channel is for me, myself, and I just for fun. And if I don't want to read this, then I am not like, I am not Roger Ebert. I am not like a paid reviewer. I don't have any obligation to read this. Like, I think it just depends on like what position you put yourself in and like how you regard your responsibility as someone who's creating content.
I agree.
I'll say that again, even though I have my completionist mindset and I push Q to read more things and not DNF, I think we both had a conversation that sometimes some of the best conversations come out of books that we don't like because we dig into like why we didn't like it. You know, we're like, you know, it's like we could have DNF'd that, 100 pages ago, but that book drilled in the point that we don't like characters that do this, or we don't like this writing style, or we don't really enjoy, this type of plot trope. So, I think it's been good that, again, not trying to validate myself, it's been good that we finished some of these joints just so we can talk about why, we didn't like certain things.
No, I do think you learn a lot about yourself as a person, as a reader, and if you're into that, about writing. If you read bad books, like I know that sometimes reading a book that I really hate, like I come away from it feeling like I have because I've been paying so much attention now, because if it's a good book, I'm like, I'm just enjoying this.
Right.
If it's a bad book, I'm like,
roller coaster.
Yeah, but then I'm thinking to myself, like, why isn't this working? It's because you didn't do it like this, and because you didn't put this, and because you didn't phrase it like this. And like, so that I'm constantly like, I'm learning so much about what I need from it emotionally, what I look for technically. And like, if you're into writing, then like how not to write, like by reading a bad book.
Yeah.
You can learn a lot. But I just want people to embrace it. It's okay. Let it go sometimes. And always, and I mean, some people are different. Like some people are DNF, I'll never touch it again. And to me, mine aren't always like that. Like some are like, if I have a really like strong reaction to it where I'm like, I'm hating this for the writing or the characters or something, and like I never want to touch it again. But some things I'm like, it could be the book, it could be me, like because I'm very much a mood reader. So yeah, I like DNF it, but sometimes I come back to them, and so that's always an option when people are like, I don't know, but maybe I could, there, who knows what waits for me on the horizon. I was like, if you're not enjoying it now, you could come back to it later because, Leanna, hold on. I started the first law, the knife. Is it the knife?
The blade itself?
The blade itself.
Got you.
I started the blade itself like 2 years ago, and I was like, oh.
I didn't like the blade itself the first time I read it years ago.
Okay. And I was like, I'm gonna come back to it, but I haven't yet. But technically, that was a DNF. So I just think that also, because sometimes it just isn't the right time. Like some people, I admire y'all who can set a TBR and read it, because I cannot. I could think about a book that morning and start it that evening, and be like,
I did create a shelf on my Goodreads called putting this one down for now, that's separate from my DNF, because like I just want to clear it off my currently reading, but I'm not like DNFing it. I'm just like, I'm not right now. So like it's just like over there, and I don't have to like have it cluttering my currently reading.
Yeah. So just
So smart.
don't be afraid.
Yeah, I need Jess and Q, the three of you need to kind of push TG, Lietta, and me to Embrace the self-care. You guys need to influence us.
I try all the time.
I know, you're like,
I know that book we were reading the other day. I was like, just don't finish it. I'm like, oh, that's so stupid. And I'm like, don't finish. Don't finish it.
That's true. I think I do know which one, because I'm like, this character's so dumb. He's so dumb. Like, well, and then it's funny because I know I can't say they're just so dumb and then leave it at that on my channel. I do have to do the like, why am I not liking this? So I can really explain, add all the asterisks of like, I know the books are subjective and this is just for me, so maybe you'll love it, kind of a thing.
Yeah,
I just will say it's dumb.
I love ranting. It's so cathartic because I don't sit there being like, I know you might like it. I'm just like, this is dumb and this should never have been published, and I hate it every second.
That is all. A question for, since we're all creators here, have you ever started a book and you most likely won't like it just to like for content, like for Booktube, like kind of the opposite, like a purposeful hate read?
No.
I felt kind of bad. I had made a list of books that I was interested in maybe checking out at some point. And then around my birthday, Alan was like, hey, send me a list of books that you're interested in. So I did, but then I sent him a really long voice message, not super long, but I was like going through it. I'm like, this one, whatever. I don't know. I just, I was explaining them all. Alan, being Alan, didn't really pay that much attention and accidentally bought me the like most romance heavy books on that list. Which Alan, did you mean to do that because you're known for not liking romance? And he was like, no, I had no idea. I was like, I sent a whole message. But then one of the books was the sequel to From Blood and Ash. And I have been sitting for so long being like, I really don't want to read this, but Alan bought it for me. And I was like, Alan certainly isn't going to follow up on my review likely of this book. Yeah. He's not gonna be like, I want to know if this is what I want to know. But I finally, I had a list of books that I was going to take into my local bookstore. And Sean saw that one. He goes, oh, but people loved, when you talked about the first one. And I was like, maybe I should keep it. I was like,
you will hate
I know. I was like, I don't want to though. And then
I feel like I've had people like exactly that. Like I'll post a rant review for a book and the first book in a series, and I'm like, when are you going to review the second one? I'm like, never. I'm not going to read the second one. The first one was terrible.
I love when people accuse you like it's some terrible thing. Like they just read books they're going to hate to make content. I'm like, some people love that. Like some people want creators to do it. So I often can't do it. Like I ended up taking the book and I was like, I really don't want to, but I did think about it, especially because Alan bought me the book, and I was like,
I don't purposely pick up books that I know I'm going to hate, but I have gone into books knowing I'm probably going to hate them and have to read them because it's like for book club and it's an obligation of some kind, in which case, and I will read it, I will not DNF it, but I was pretty sure going into this that I was not going to be a fan. But by myself on my channel, I'll never purposely put something on my TBR that no one made me because I think I'm going to hate it. And wouldn't that be fun? Because it will not be fun. No. It will be horrible.
It'll be fun for them to see you suffer.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to read A Court of Silver Flames, and then someone bought it, and I was like, for me, and I was like, fine, I'll read it. And I was hoping maybe I'd enjoy it more than I did, but then people are like, can you please read Crescent City? I'm like, no. One is 800 pages. Y'all don't love me. You just want me to suffer for your entertainment.
You won't hate that like you hated A Court of Silver Flames, though. Just saying.
What?
We'll buddy read it, Jess. We'll buddy read it.
You won't hate that one. Like you hated the Court of whatever.
Her books are 500 pages too long. I'm already gonna tell you
it is about 200 pages too long. I will say that. But anyway, you might DNF.
You don't care about me either. Whatever.
Hey, I know you'll DNF it if you don't like it. Just DNF it. It's okay. It'll be all right. Yeah, I would never hate read something on purpose, just for content reasons either. I love myself too much to do that. So no.
I'm thinking about practicing hate reading because I want to be able to break something down, like Leanne says. It's well, this is why I don't like it because I'm so just used to being like, man, F this, I'm done. I'm not reading this. So, but now I'm like, all right, well, maybe I should think more critically about what I dislike about this book.
Like
'Cause
maybe, the
maybe-
Emperor
'cause sometimes-
Palpatine being like, let the hate flow through you.
'Cause sometimes Terry will be like, "Oh, why don't you like it?" Like, and I'm like, I don't know. This isn't it. And so, like, maybe now I can try to answer those questions for myself. So I'm gonna embrace my inner Leanne. I'm gonna try.
Oh no!
So.
Now we only have
Opposite effect.
Dang it.
Jess
No.
and I will DNF enough for all
I'm
of
gonna
us.
give it a try.
Yes.
I will
How
say,
much do you guys DNF in a year? I'm curious. Those of you that do sometimes, like,
Honestly, I'm not opposed to it. I just don't do it that often because I'm buddy reading.
yeah.
If I wasn't buddy reading 90% of what I actually read, I would probably DNF like
90%? That's pretty high, bro.
I'm saying 90% of what I read is usually what we're buddy reading together.
Yeah.
And so I'm not DNFing anything
Okay.
for the most part. But if it was just me individually, like I would probably, my rate of DNF would be a lot higher.
Gotcha.
So
I DNF like 12 to 20 books a year, I would say.
I'm right around there. Yeah.
I've DNF'd one this year.
Oh man.
I don't know. A couple, maybe. Like, I'm trying to be better about it, but I would say somewhere between 5 to 7 or 8, maybe this year. Anyway, I feel like I've been letting myself DNF things more, but I will say it's really nice to. It's nice to have my husband, who's also a reader, but we read different things when we talk to each other about books, because I start basically like forming my thoughts as I'm telling him. I'm like, it's so stupid. It's just, I can't figure out why. And then I'll sit and be like, I think it's because, okay, hold on, let me go back. So there's like this at the beginning of the book, and then I'll just start ranting to him, and he's just like very nicely listening because he's a nice man. But yeah, this was super fun. I almost feel like we could. Sorry, my dog was being adorable. She was like spinning around until she was comfy, and then she laid in her bed. But I feel like we could follow up in like a year and see if like which way are some of the DNFers
I
are.
predict that nothing will have changed, and those who DNF will continue, and those who don't won't.
It would be interesting though to do a follow-up video, maybe like toward the end of the year, and so like
I'm down.
that's not far away, but to see how many books we end up DNFing and like why we DNF'd it, and we kind of have to like explain to each other what we didn't like. So the people that DNF a lot need to have better answers than I don't know. And then those of us who don't typically DNF maybe need to try the self-care approach a little bit more. And we can see who comes out happy.
For one title, Leanna.
You can't make me.
Are you? But you're like making yourself read books you hate, and are you still drinking matcha, which also you hate because it can taste
Okay,
like
but
grass?
I'm making it into a smoothie, so I can't taste it anymore. So
I was like, you're truly suffering over there.
I put like so much raw cacao powder and bananas and everything, and you cannot taste the green tea at all.
I was like, you are suffering with that, and then the one book I forgot that was like $40. I
Dreams
remember it
of
was
the
$40.
Dying. I wanted to say earlier, but I already ranted about that book so much I didn't want to do that more. When you were saying an instant DNF, how do you know? I was like, you know how some books before you get to even the prologue, there'll be like a page that just has like a tagline that's just like maybe like 2 sentences that's like setting up like a vibe, Well, that book had like weird, not correct English in the little tag thing that was like before you even get to the prologue. And I was like, oh no. Oh no.
I will say, I remember reading before, like years ago, I picked up American Gods and I read the back and I was like, this feels pretentious. And I'm like, I don't know, I just get a vibe. And it's funny because I feel like we joke that you have pretentious taste, Leanna, and it's hilarious. I would still read Neil Gaiman. I've never read any, and I plan to. But that was.
I tell people not to start with American Gods.
That's good to know. Q, were you about to say something? I feel like I accidentally jumped in before you.
I don't remember if I was. No, it's all good. It's all good.
Okay. Well,
I don't
anyway,
think I was,
I think I'll try to wrap it up for us because we're about 1/4 till 2 hours of chatting. So this was super, super fun. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. I'll have everybody's channels linked in the description bar as usual, and I would love to know everybody else's answers who ends up watching this to the questions that we asked. But anyway, thanks, everybody. We'll see you later.